The family dinner erupted into a full-blown confrontation when the mother-in-law produced a stack of bills stating, "Son, here are the statements for the 70,000 rubles owed for utilities over the past 6 months." Her gaze, heavy with accusation, was fixed on her daughter-in-law. Without missing a beat, the son leaped to his mother's defense, grabbing his wife by the arm and shouting, "Are you out of your mind? Why aren't you paying for your mother-in-law? Get the money!" But the woman remained unruffled. "Hello, dear listeners. I'm delighted to welcome you to my channel. I present to you a captivating new story. Enjoy the listen." Marina fumbled for her keys in her purse, pausing at the doorway. From inside, her mother-in-law's voice boomed. Tamara Vladimirovna was explaining something to her son, with the tone one reserves for the particularly slow-witted. Marina sighed and pushed the door open. 3 years prior, when she and Dennis had first married, she had still held on to hope that things would improve, that her mother-in-law would adjust, that their relationship would warm. Naively, she hadn't foreseen that Tamara Vladimirovna, who resided in her own 2-bedroom apartment across town, would visit them thrice weekly. Always unannounced, always with keys, Dennis had personally handed over. "The first month of marriage," he'd explained, "Mother needs access, just in case anything happens." Marina had remained silent then. In fact, she'd remained silent a great deal during their first year. Her mother-in-law sat at the kitchen table, papers spread before her. Dennis stood nearby, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through his phone, calculating something. Marina walked past, kicking off her heels, but Tamara Vladimirovna called her back in a commanding tone. "Marina, come here. We need to talk." It was always the same. "We need to talk," signaled that the mother-in-law was about to demand something, and Dennis would silently acquiesce. Marina returned to the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe. "Sit down." Her mother-in-law gestured to a chair. "I'll stand." Tamara Vladimirovna pursed her lips. She had always disliked it when Marina displayed even a sliver of independence. "As you wish. I wanted to discuss a financial matter." A financial matter, as if discussing a business contract, not their household budget. Marina worked as an accountant in a small firm, earning 48,000. Dennis, a delivery driver, made slightly more than 50,000. They rented a 1-bedroom apartment for 25,000. Another 12,000 or so went towards utilities, and the remainder covered food, clothing, and transportation. They lived modestly, but without debt. Tamara Vladimirovna, meanwhile, received a pension of about 25,000. She also worked part-time at a library, plus she rented out her garage for 7,000. Quite comfortable for a single woman. Yet her mother-in-law possessed a peculiar talent for always needing something. One time, it was insufficient funds for medication. Another time, the refrigerator broke or she needed a new fur coat. "I was doing some calculations," Tamara Vladimirovna began, tapping a pen on her papers. "You rent an apartment for 25,000. It's impractical, living in someone else's space, throwing money away." "And what do you propose?" Marina asked. "I propose we move in together. I have 2 rooms. That will be enough for you. You'll pay me 20,000. It's less than you're paying now. Plus, you'll save on utilities, and I'll receive some assistance." Dennis remained silent, his gaze fixed on his phone. Marina looked at him, not expecting him to say a word. He merely shrugged. "Dennis, are you serious?" Marina couldn't contain herself. "Mom, we'll think about it," he mumbled. "What's there to think about?" his mother retorted indignantly. "I'm family, after all. Family should stick together." Marina turned and left the kitchen. She wasn't going to argue at that moment. After 3 years, she had learned one simple truth. Tamara Vladimirovna would not back down until she got her way, and Dennis always helped her achieve it. For 2 weeks, her mother-in-law exerted pressure, calling 10 times a day, arriving with new calculations, lamenting her poor health, and hinting that she would soon be all alone. Dennis listened, nodded, and then spent his evenings trying to persuade Marina. "What's the harm? She's my mother. It's hard for her to be alone." "Hard? She has her pension, a part-time job, and rents out a garage." "Dennis, she just wants to control us. Don't be ridiculous, it's just about saving money." "There will be no savings. She'll find something to spend it on anyway. But Marina understood she had lost before she had even agreed, because Dennis had one ironclad rule: mother is always right. No matter how much Marina argued or presented her case, he always sided with Tamara Vladimirovna. A month later, they packed their belongings and moved in. Initially, it was tolerable. Tamara Vladimirovna even made an effort to maintain distance, not prying with questions. Marina and Dennis occupied the larger room, and her mother-in-law stayed in her own. It seemed each had their own space and interests. But after just a week, the minor annoyances began. Tamara Vladimirovna would enter their room without knocking, checking if they had dusted or made their bed. She offered criticisms about how Marina cooked, dressed, and spoke. "Dennis, tell her that soup should be made with meat broth, not these bouillon cubes," her mother-in-law would complain. "You're a man, you need proper nutrition." Dennis remained silent. Marina grew angry, but also stayed quiet. She worked until 6, returning home exhausted, only to be met with nitpicking and lectures. Her mother-in-law, meanwhile, was home almost constantly. Her part-time library job seemed more like a formality. About 2 months later, Tamara Vladimirovna announced that the utility costs had increased. Now instead of 20,000, they had to pay 25,000. Marina was indignant. "We agreed on 20,000. We agreed when the rates were different. Everything has gone up. Do you think I should cover the difference out of my own pocket?" Dennis immediately agreed. Marina gritted her teeth and paid. But something inside her snapped. She realized she had walked into a trap with no apparent escape. Moving back out was not an option. Dennis would never agree. He now spent every evening with his mother in the kitchen, discussing the day's news, laughing at her jokes. Marina remained alone in their room. One evening, Tamara Vladimirovna declared they needed a new television. The old one, she said, was faulty and wouldn't pick up channels. "I found one for 42,000. We'll split it equally." "Equally?" Marina repeated, "meaning Dennis and I pay 21,000? What's the problem? You'll be watching it too." "We don't watch television." "So what? It's a shared appliance in the apartment." Dennis supported his mother. Marina paid again. The television was huge and hung in the living room. Marina never went in there. Then, other expenses started piling up. Her mother-in-law needed to go to her dacha or escort a friend to the hospital or had some other need. Each time, Tamara Vladimirovna would appeal to her son, who would then turn to Marina. "Your paycheck just came in yesterday. Give Mom a couple of thousand." Marina would give it, because refusing meant a full-blown argument, enduring reproaches, and seeing Dennis look at her with disappointment. 6 months later, Marina tallied the expenses. It turned out she had spent over 100,000 rubles on her mother-in-law during that time alone. 25,000 for rent monthly, plus the television, plus constant loans that were never repaid. Marina lost weight, became gaunt, and lay awake at night, replaying the same thoughts over and over. How had her life deteriorated to this point? Dennis remained oblivious. He was content. His mother was nearby, his wife was obedient, and everything was peaceful. Sometimes he tried to embrace Marina, but she pulled away. Intimacy under these circumstances felt like a mockery. Then her mother-in-law's health began to decline. Tamara Vladimirovna constantly complained of high blood pressure, heart problems, and joint pain. Doctors found nothing serious, but she bought medications in bulk. Dennis dutifully brought home money for the pills. Marina no longer argued. She simply waited for something. She didn't know what. And then one evening, she came home from work to find Dennis and Tamara Vladimirovna sitting in the living room, both wearing expressions as if something terrible had happened. Her mother-in-law waited until Marina had taken off her shoes, then commanded, "Marina, come here, immediately." She walked into the kitchen. Tamara Vladimirovna sat at the table, a stack of bills spread before her. Dennis stood nearby, looking as dark as a storm cloud. "Look," her mother-in-law said, pointing a finger at the statements. 70,000 rubles for utilities accrued over 6 months. Marina silently looked at the papers. 70,000 rubles for 6 months. That meant 11 to 12,000 per month. She slowly raised her eyes to her mother-in-law. "And?" "What do you mean, and?" Tamara Vladimirovna flared up. "We agreed that you would pay the utilities. I gave you the apartment and you pay for electricity, water, and gas. Marina frowned. We agreed to pay you 25,000 rubles a month. That included rent and utilities. Nonsense. The mother-in-law cut her off. 25 is for the apartment, and utilities are separate. Did you really think I would pay for them myself? Marina felt a surge of heat rising within her. She clearly remembered the conversation. Tamara Vladimirovna had promised that the 25,000, initially 20, was all-inclusive, but arguing now would be pointless. Her mother-in-law would twist her words and Dennis would believe her. Dennis stepped forward, his face flushed, a vein throbbing on his forehead. He grabbed Marina by the shoulder, not painfully but sharply, and roared, "Are you out of your mind? Why aren't you paying for your mother-in-law? Get the money!" Marina froze. He had never laid a hand on her before. He had yelled, yes, he had accused her, but it had never come to this. She looked into his eyes and suddenly understood that this was the end of everything, the marriage, her patience, her hope. She slowly pulled her shoulder free, looked at her mother-in-law, then at her husband, and said calmly, very calmly, "Fine, I'll bring the money right now." Dennis stepped back. Her mother-in-law nodded with satisfaction. Marina walked into their room, retrieved a folder of documents from the closet, returned to the kitchen, and placed a printout on the table. "Here is my bank statement. Every month I transfer 25,000 rubles to your account, Tamara Vladimirovna, for 6 consecutive months, 150,000. Here are the dates, here is the account number." Her mother-in-law turned pale. Dennis snatched the paper and stared at the figures. But that's for the apartment," Tamara Vladimirovna stammered. "That's for everything. You yourself said the utilities were included. I even saved a voice message. Would you like to hear it?" Marina took out her phone and played the recording. Her mother-in-law's voice was clear, without static. 25,000 rubles a month, and you don't have to worry about anything. Everything's included, the apartment and the utilities. Silence fell. Tamara Vladimirovna opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water. Dennis looked at his mother, then at his wife. "Mom, you said—" "I don't remember," his mother-in-law squeaked. "She made it all up, forged it." Marina laughed. The laughter was loud, almost hysterical. "Forged a voice message. Seriously? Are you going to tell me I'm a hacker next?" Tamara Vladimirovna jumped up and grabbed the bills. "There's still a debt. Someone has to pay." "You do," Marina replied calmly. "Because these bills are in your name. This is your apartment, your utilities. Dennis and I aren't even registered here. I checked." Her mother-in-law slumped into a chair. Dennis stood like a statue, speechless. Marina put the documents back into the folder. Her hands didn't tremble. A strange calmness spread through her, the kind that comes when a decision has finally been made. "I'll move out tomorrow," she said. "I'll take my things. Dennis, you can stay here with Mom. It's more convenient for you." "Marina, wait," Dennis started, but she raised her hand. "No, it's over. I'm done." She went into their room, closed the door, sat on the bed, and for the first time in a long time allowed herself to relax. Voices could be heard from the other side of the wall. Her mother-in-law was muttering something, and Dennis was trying to calm her. But Marina no longer listened. The next day, she indeed packed her belongings. Dennis tried to stop her, to persuade her, promising to fix everything. Marina silently placed clothes into her bag. Tamara Vladimirovna demonstratively locked herself in her room. "You'll regret this," Dennis threw at her as a parting shot. "You won't survive on your own." Marina turned. "You know what's funny? I've been on my own for the last 6 months anyway." She rented a small studio apartment for 18,000. It was cramped, but it was her own space. No one entered without knocking, and no one controlled her every step. For the first week, she simply came home from work and sat in silence. It was bliss. Dennis Tommen. Dennis called for a couple more weeks. At first, he asked her to come back, then accused her of selfishness, then asked again. Marina blocked his number and filed for divorce. The proceedings were swift. They had no shared property and no children. 3 months later, she coincidentally met Dennis at a supermarket. He was thinner, gaunter, standing at the checkout with a basket full of junk food, chips, crackers, beer. He saw Marina and looked flustered. "Hi?" "Hi." An awkward pause. "How are you?" he asked. "Fine. Listen, I'm sorry about that night. I shouldn't have—" "Forget it," Marina cut him off. "It doesn't matter anymore." He nodded, seeming about to add something, but she walked past. The checkout line was already forming, and that evening, Marina received a message from Dennis's former colleague. They sometimes communicated, and she was aware of the divorce. "Listen, are you aware that Dennis was fired? The boss had enough. He was rude and quit. Now he's out of work. And his mom, they say, moved in with a friend's son. She couldn't afford the utilities. She rented out her apartment to some students. Dennis is now crashing at friends' places." Marina read the message and smirked. She felt no schadenfreude, only a faint sadness. Things could have been different if Dennis had stood by her side even once, if Tamara Vladimirovna hadn't been so greedy and calculating. But what is. A year passed. Marina completed a training course and moved to another company with a salary of 65,000. She rented a larger apartment, a one-bedroom in a new building. She got a cat. On weekends, she met with friends, went to the movies, and read books. One day, Dennis messaged her again. A long message filled with remorse and pleas for forgiveness. He had found work as a security guard and was renting a room. His mother no longer bothered him. She was too busy with her own life. He realized how wrong he had been. Perhaps they could try again. Marina read and pondered, recalling how he had grabbed her shoulder, how he had roared demanding money, how he had never once stood up for her, how he had chosen his mother again and again until Marina finally broke. She deleted the message without replying, put away her phone and poured herself some tea. The cat jumped onto her lap and purred. Outside, snow was falling, soft and slow. Marina picked up a book she had long intended to finish from the table and settled in comfortably. The apartment was warm and quiet. No unfamiliar voices, no complaints, no expectations. Just her, the cat, and the peaceful rustle of pages.